Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today my guest is Adrian O'Hagan. Adrian has a business called The Bearded Bee in Melbourne, which provides local honey. Welcome to the show, Adrian.
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to having you on because something that we've got in common is we've had a shared experience. Not a very pleasant one, but we'll get to that in a moment. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your business to get us started?
Yeah, sure. Um, look, I probably kicked off the business five, between 5 to 8 years ago, kind of varies depending on what you consider the start of a business being. But um, my business is essentially, it's more of a side hustle, really. I mean, I've got my day job, and beekeeping is what's always kind of kept me sane. And it's something I've always enjoyed doing. And I think a lot of beekeepers find that as they go along, they get more hives, and then the next thing you know, it's like, well, I've really got too many hives for my backyard. I kind of need to put them somewhere else. And so before I knew it, I had hives at quite a few locations. And at which point it's just like, well, I've got a lot of honey. I should really do something with that. And so I decided to basically localize it in the sense that, I knew that a lot of people were liking their honey to be as close to them as possible, mainly, for the belief of the health benefits, hay fever, etc. And I've thought, well, that's fine, but I also like knowing that honey is coming, from my local area. Um, and so I just kind of leaned into it. And so the next thing I knew, I had Forest Hill honey. I live in Forest Hill. The furthest away from me at the when I first started was probably Ashburton, and then it got further away with Warrandyte South. But I've kind of consolidated now. Now I'm probably a little bit more selfish with my time, and so I don't go further than about 7 or 8 kilometers away from my home. So it's a bit of a tight circle, but it works well for me because it means that for weekend hives, etc. So weekend inspections, I'm not spending all my time traveling. I'm spending more time inspecting than traveling. But people love the fact that they know that if I say to them, well, this is from Blackburn South, I can tell them exactly where it's from in Blackburn South, and I can tell them, what some of the plants are in that particular area. And they get excited because they know the area, they know the streets, they know the trees. And so it does quite well from that particular perspective. Most of my customers are repeat customers, and most of them come to me originally because, they wanted something that's closer to them. So whether it be because they appreciate low food miles, whether it's because they appreciate the health benefits associated with uh, from a hay fever
Pollen.
perspective
Hmm.
in the pollen, or whether it's just because they want to support the local guy. Um, all of those things work well for me, but it's also about building relationships with people. Um, you know, I started playing guitar recently, and my guitar teacher is it's one of my customers. Like, because we got talking, I knew he was a guitar teacher, so I
Hmm.
reached out.
Hmm.
So,
And let me guess, you've made a pretty sweet deal.
I see
Yeah.
what you did there.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's really cool because, if someone's in your area and they're buying your honey, then they can walk outside and the bees that are foraging in their own garden could well be your bees. Well,
It's entirely
so that's a really
possible.
cool thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and in many cases, that's more true than not.
Hmm. Yeah, that's excellent. So let's have a chat about bee immunotherapy, which is something that you and I have both done. And it's a bit of an interesting thing. Some people don't know about it, some people do. Do you want to tell listeners a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So basically, look, every beekeeper I know has been stung. Like it's just a fact of life. Um, but sometimes the amount of times you get stung can be problematic. And you can, find that immune system isn't coping as well with the stings as what they used to. And that's certainly what I found. The whole idea with immunotherapy is you get treated with bee venom over a period of time, and it basically manages your um, immunization levels, or your immune levels, I should say, to bee venom. So whereas my trigger point was being stung twice on my upper lip through the veil. And that triggered an anaphylactic reaction a number of years ago. After I went through the immunotherapy program in Mount Waverley over a 2 or 3 year period. Now, I certainly didn't have to wait 2 or 3 years to be able to work with bees again. I was able to work with bees again probably within a month. And what I did was I was very cautious, but I already had the green light um, from my doctor who was treating me. He did quite an accelerated program to because he knew that I was probably going to try to look after my bees as best I could. And it happened around Christmas, which is of course, you know, a pretty busy time for a beekeeper. Um, and so when I say I got back into it gently, I had a friend help me out for the first month or so. And then he continued to come with me for the inspections for the next month or so, just to basically make sure that I was going to be okay. I mean, anywhere I went, I had an EpiPen with me just to be safe. But it really changed the way that I looked after bees. I was probably, when you start out as a beekeeper, you many of us have a mentor. Not all of us do. And my mentor was good, but in retrospect, there were probably few more things that I would have been better off having learned sooner rather than later. And I will be the first to say that the biggest change I made was just how gently I treated the bees. And with the smoking, etc., to the point where now when I go out with people, they're just like, man, you are like ridiculously gentle with the bees. But, you know, I, the way I look at it is I'm breaking into their home and taking their stuff and usually messing around with, what they've done in the meantime. So, I try to treat them as with as much respect as possible and, minimal interventions, but at the same time making sure that they're all right. And that's worked quite well for me. I still cop the occasional sting. It's never been an issue, but I've certainly not had anything like the issues that I had prior to that anaphylactic experience.
Mm. Yeah, so it was a similar thing for me, having to go and get the therapy done. And let's just tell listeners what they actually do, keeping in mind we're not doctors, so we don't want to give any advice. But it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I went into Monash Hospital. Is that the same place as where you went?
No, now
You
I
said
actually
you said Mount Waverley. I don't know if that's the same place.
no. So Mount Waverley, that was a immunization. I can't remember the term. Chalk it up to weariness. But basically, he specialized in immunotherapies. And he's retired now, I believe, a man called Colin Little, and he was working in Mount Waverley for a long period of time. And I know that there was a lot of work done at Monash. And, even before I went through this, I went to a beekeeping conference where there were people from Monash talking. And I was actually quite interested in it, thinking, oh gosh, maybe I should do that one day. But obviously I did. But certainly, and I'm sure it was the same for you. Like, they start off with some bee venom, and they usually get the bee venom. They actually import it. Well, Colin does. I don't know whether it was the same for you, but they
Yeah,
imported it
I believe
from
so. Yeah.
Canada.
Yep. Mhm.
So either Canada or the US was where they were getting it from. Mine was from Canada, so it was nicer bee venom, I guess.
Mhm.
And they so but what they do is that they start off very slowly, very softly, gently. So when they are first working out how dire you or how much in need you are, it's, I mean, maybe you've had a test done before, or maybe your kids have had a test done before, but it's like the pinprick test. And so they draw, basically what he did was he got a pen and he drew like a grid of dots on my arm and just did a bunch of pinpricks and, dropped different things in to see how I would react. And sure enough, the bee venom made me react. Like, he's like, yep, you're anaphylactic. Which I was like, yeah, I knew at that point. And so what he did over a period of time was he would give me injections with, just trace amounts, and it would build up and up and up over the period. It was a number of years ago now. I don't remember exactly what the quantities were, but they were minute, like, really small.
Mhm.
And they would slowly build up. And then after, after 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, he would do intermittent tests to see how I was performing in terms of whether, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how immune I was, so to speak. Um, which I already knew because I was still getting stung every now and again. But I wasn't falling over. My wife wasn't freaking out. I'm clearly still alive to tell the tale.
Mhm.
But I remember posting about the anaphylactic experience on Facebook, like on one of the beekeeping groups forums. And I posted a picture of myself in the hospital bed doing my best duck live because that's where I'd been stung. And there was a lot of questions about it. And there was one person in particular who said, you're an idiot. I've omitted a word because I'm not sure about the policies here. But I'm an idiot and I should find another job and, not do bees. And, that person removed the comment after a couple of days or something. But it's just like, well, there's risk in crossing the road. There's risk, you know, um, you could choke on a walnut, like anything could go wrong. It's all about managing those risks. Like, if you know what the situation is and and you know that there's a path forward and you choose to take that path, then why wouldn't you? Like, I could just as easily have decided, sod it, I'm not going to do beekeeping anymore, and then get stung down at the park. Like, it's so I figured I'd owed it to myself to go through the therapy process. Um, and also, it's something I love doing. Like, why would I give up on something that I love and, kind of gives me that mental health benefits? Yeah, so that's why I went down that path. Now, people might be wondering, oh, obviously it takes time. Is it expensive? Answer is no, it's not really. The venom can be hard to come by, but you can order it from places like the Box Hill Hospital. I mentioned before that I'm in Forest Hill, which is the eastern suburbs of Victoria. I'm sure that if you were in your area, that the local hospital, you should be able to order it from there as well.
Nope.
No, that
No.
wasn't your experience.
It was no, no, no. It was extremely difficult for me to get. I had to get it from Monash.
Right.
They were the only ones who could get it for me, which ended up being an issue in the end. How long did you have it for? Or are you still having
So
it?
so I was getting the first 3 months was pretty intensive. And I was probably getting it 3 times a week, which is much more frequent than he would normally do. But I was lucky and I was grateful. And then after that, I was getting treatments maybe once a month. Now, I mentioned costs before. So the cost that I found myself paying, I would pay for the venom, which I think was between 40 and $60 for a vial. And that would usually last, oh gosh, quite a few months, maybe 3 months, I guess. No, longer. Apologies, it's been a while. And then the cost, of course, was for each. treatment. So the treatment was between $45 and $50 a time, and I would get $40 or so back from Medicare. So ultimately, it cost me about $10 a session. Um, so, again, why wouldn't you
Yeah.
for peace of mind? It's like,
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you know you're allergic,
mm,
and I had to sort of ask myself, should I get out of beekeeping at the time? But
mm,
then I'm a big fan of bike riding, and
yep,
in springtime, bees just sort of fly into your shirt when you're riding bike anyway,
yeah,
and you can get stung on a bike ride. So even if I'm going to quit or not quit, I'm going to have to do it anyway, just because if you go riding out in the middle of nowhere, you get stung by a bee, you don't want to have a reaction. So I
100%.
did it just because of that reason as well. And I'm glad I did it because it only took me a few months and I was back beekeeping and it's never been a problem since. It's 10 years ago. How's
Mm.
it been for you?
I think I got the clean bill of health maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay, so that's been a
maybe
while.
not even that long. But again, same as what you said, it just hasn't been a problem since. Like
Hmm.
even like, the most I've been stung like in a single day since then is probably like maybe three or four. And, you know, nothing like, and before that, like the most I'd been stung. And again, like I mentioned that I changed the way I do my beekeeping. Um, so before the most I think I got stung was maybe about 20 times, like in a 1 hour session. And I remember I was watching a movie with my son that night, um, and I was looking at my arm, and it just basically looked blotchy red all over, and I was just like, and I felt like a space cadet because I'd taken some Phenergan, and I went to have a shower, and I'm looking at myself in the mirror, going, "Oh my God, my whole body was just." Red and blotchy. Now, in hindsight, I know that was an anaphylactic reaction. But at the time, I chalked it up to the fact that, dude,
At the
he's
time,
done 20 times.
the movie was pretty good, and you're like, I don't want to go to
I've got no
hospital.
idea what the movie was.
It was a good movie. Too good to go to hospital.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think, if someone who's listening to this and thinks that they might be allergic, it's definitely worth going in and doing a test. And the process does take a while. It's a number of days. I think I had to go in sort of 5 or 6 times to the hospital. But if you're a beekeeper, and you really enjoy it, it's definitely worth it, I
Did
think.
you find that you had to put your name on a waiting list in order to be seen?
No, I think I was seen fairly quickly. And it was really interesting when I did it. I was in a big room. It was the oncology ward at the hospital. And one
Mhm.
day a week, the oncology doctors have a day to do their admin or whatever. And that's the day they do all the immunotherapy. So it was
Right.
sitting in the oncology chairs, and most of the other people in there were kids. And it wasn't for bees, it was for other things like ants and other
Yeah.
thing. And everyone had to wear a sign with a cartoon of the animal or the insect that they were being treated for. So I had to be, and actually made some really good friends because there was a couple of other people doing it that would come in on the same days as me, and we just had to sit there in these chairs for a couple of
Mm.
hours while the stuff was, taking effect and being monitored. So made some good friends. So definitely do it.
That's interesting because mine was a little bit different to that.
Hmm.
I mean, one, I had to put because it was a private practice, so there was a waiting list. I was extraordinarily fortunate because from the day I called, I was originally told it would be about 3 months wait to see him, but I ended up getting in 10 days because there was a cancellation, which is great. But but in terms of like the duration of the appointments, um, you know, the thing that would usually take longest was like you've got a 9 o'clock appointment, you get there at 10 to 9, you get seen at 10 past 9, he gives you the injection, you wait for about 20 minutes just to make sure that you're not going to have any kind of weird thing, and then you can go. So it sounded like my time in the room, so to speak, was a lot shorter than yours,
Hmm.
which I'm not hating.
Hmm. Yeah. probably there's a bit of benefit to doing it private there.
Yeah.
One funny thing that happened was between when I had my reaction and went to hospital the first time and when I started the therapy, I went and had some royal jelly.
Oh.
Yeah, someone I knew had some royal jelly, and I tried it, and that made my face just go whoop, all red. And I thought, okay, that was a bad idea.
Don't do
These
that.
these days, I can eat royal jelly and it's fine, but. Yeah, very interesting. All right, well, let's jump on to another question. Thanks for sharing your experience there. Because of your business, you're not moving your bees on pallets, I imagine.
Correct.
Because it's all backyards and in and around Melbourne in the suburbs. So I imagine you're moving around single colonies.
Generally speaking, yeah, that's right. Like if I need to move a hive, um, and I don't need to move them terribly often. Like I'll probably move hives maybe half a dozen times a year.
Yeah.
And when I say that, it's not because I'm thinking to myself, oh, I've got to chase a flow or something like that. It's more of a case of, oh, okay, well, I've got a new host, or or another host might have reached the end of, their hosting period. And usually, if they've reached the end of their hosting period, 9 times out of 10, it's because, um,
It's a nice way of saying that they're on the phone saying, that's enough, mate. They've
yeah, look,
reached the end of their hosting period. I like
look,
that.
there's most of my hosts, like, I've got very strong retention rates.
Yeah.
And I say that as somebody who works in the subscription economy. So,
Yeah.
but but yeah, I'm very fortunate, and I'm also very selective about the kind of places that they go into. So for everybody who asks me, maybe one in three I'll say yes to, and it's down to a lot of things. Like um, it's partly the location. I'm not going to, I've been to places that are absolutely amazing, like, the most beautiful houses, the most lovely people, perfect backyard for it, like, really well shielded, but it's miles away.
Yeah.
So, so I'm not going to do that. But in terms of moving the hives around, like I remember making a post about it ages ago. If it's a single box, then I'll just tie it up, seal it up, and put it in the back of the car. If it's a if it's two, then you can even put it in the back seat of a car if you really want to. I don't do that anymore because I eventually got myself like a dual cab. It just made beekeeping so much easier. And so again, like, three or four, I hate moving a four. They're heavy as all get out. But you can, like, you tie it down as tightly as you can, and away you go. Like,
So how are you moving them from out of the backyard to, down the driveway and onto the back of the ute?
I'll usually get somebody to help me because I like my back. But I'll put them on a trolley. Obviously you've got them tied up with your belts and ropes, etc. You seal up the front because there's literally tens of thousands of reasons that you want to do that right. Um, and I ended up getting myself some ramps to basically pull them up onto the back of the tray. Because again, you can lift it, but why would you if you don't have to? Particularly if it's like three or four. I mean, I can carry a fairly, I can carry a lot. But again, if you don't have to, why would you? So certainly I don't even attempt to pick up like a three or a four on my own. That's just insane. But a one or a two is obviously no problem. Um, but it's not something I have to do terribly often. Probably I have had situations like I remember really well, like when I moved the bees out of Warrandyte South, and I moved them out of there just because there just wasn't enough food for them there. They were just going backwards. And I think I moved them to Blackburn North or Box Hill North or something like that. And I remember driving along this road, and I always drive a little bit more slowly because you've got bees on the back, and even though it's tied down really tightly, I'm just very cautious. And it's like 10 o'clock at night, and there's like cars like behind you, as if to say hurry up, and I'm just like, dude, I'm driving over you know speed bumps and things like that. Please don't rush me. But yeah, I
So,
mean,
so you
uh,
think that ramps are probably the best bit of advice you could give people moving in and out of a backyard in an urban environment?
I think make sure you have a good trolley.
Yeah.
The Bunnings used to sell this amazing trolley. You can still get it, like if it's on order or something. But I mean, trolleys are easy to come by, but you want one with a really good lip. So basically you want the lip to go all the way underneath your box. Um, because if you're doing that, then there's much less chance of any kind of mishap. And then you secure the hive to your trolley, just to again reduce risk. Um, and again, depending on if it's like only two or three, then maybe I might not worry about the ramps, but certainly three or four. If it's a heavy three, then yeah, I'll use the ramps. You get yourself well, the ramps I think I got from Super Cheap Auto or something like that. You put on your roof rack when you're moving around. Um, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. The only thing that you do need to be mindful of is you don't want to do it, on a hot night. Ideally it should be cold, because that way the bees are much more likely to be all nicely tucked away, in bed, not necessarily asleep because they don't do that, but less likely to be bothering you. Um,
Do you block them in?
yes,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep.
Um,
And do you use a red light or a regular light?
I have used a red light in the past, and it's just gold. A mate of mine, he swears by this headlamp that he's got, which is, alternates between red and white, and so he just leaves the red one on whenever he's manipulating at night. I've found that I don't really need to, mainly because what I do is, when I get to the venue that I'm going to be moving them from, like the first thing I'll do is I'll just make sure that they're all in, and if they're hovering around the front, then I'll just get a spray. So just basically a diffuser, give them a bit of a spray of water, and they're usually like, "What the?" And then they go inside. You might lose half a dozen doing it that way, but I'd rather lose half a dozen than, piss off 5,000 bees. Um, and yeah, then I'll seal them up, get it onto the trolley. If it's wet, it's not ideal because certainly if you're dragging a trolley that's heavy across a wet lawn, that's a pain in the butt. You don't want to do that. So, your ideal scenario is a dry night, but it's cool. So tonight would be perfect.
Yep. Yeah, it's very cool tonight, that's for sure.
Hmm.
Well, excellent. Yeah, thanks for that advice. I think it's tough for people when they start beekeeping to know what to do in terms of moving the hive. It's not talked about in many manuals. There's all the instructions about how to check the brood and diseases and honey and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah,
moving them around, you don't see too much of it in the manuals.
no, and it's funny because I mean I've probably changed my approach like a number of times. Like like when I first started beekeeping, we just had the family car, which was a bit like a laser or something like that, I guess. Um, and so, you could put a single box in the boot quite easily. And in a pinch, you could put a two, but there's no way you could have put a three in. I'd always like borrow a friend's van or borrow a friend's like light truck or something like that. So certainly, um, the dual cab's fantastic, or a ute or something like that is amazing. I know people who use trailers. I don't know. I figured they'd be more bouncy and would aggravate the bees more than not. But the other thing that you got to remember too is like once you've moved them, you'll feel them. Like you can hear them buzzing about in there because, you're moving them about. So their whole vertigo thing is kind of like, doing its thing. So then what you got to do is like once you place it, then, pack up, like do everything you need to do, like, make sure that your roof racks are tied back on your roof and make sure that your trolley's put away, all those kind of things. And the last thing you do is you open it up again, but you don't do it straight away. Like if you do it straight away, they just kind of get really narky, but they never really fly at you. They'll just crawl out. Um, so it's it's not hard. It's just, something to be mindful of. And the last thing you want to do, of course, is forget to let them out. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I've done that.
did you lose any?
Yeah, I have lost a few over the years. I used to use in the early years pieces of carpet to block up the colonies.
Yep.
And I had to stop doing that because I sometimes you just forget, if you move around a lot and they're sort of, not all in a line, but sort of sporadically placed around.
Mm.
Um, and it's dark time, maybe you forget one. I think I've forgotten a few in the past and I just had to stop using. And now, I mean, I move them open now, but if I ever do want to block them in, I will use paper towel or something like that. Just because if you do forget, they can chew through it.
Yeah. Well, sponges are also good.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So just like, those spongy squares that you do the dishes with. Maybe don't use one that you've done the dishes with.
Hmm.
Um, just fold it in half and shove it in, and it works out quite well.
Hmm.
And depending on what kind of,
I wonder if anyone in your house has figured out where all those sponges are going.
I'm not going to comment on that.
Yeah.
But I actually I do use ventilated bases.
Hmm.
And because I use ventilated bases, I have absolutely no problem with like just throwing something in front of the entrance. I use Nuplas hives, Nuplas bases. And so they've got quite, a defined space. It's not too wide for the entry. So it's not hard to, just put like maybe a bit of even just a piece of paper over it and then just whack your masking tape over the top of that. They're not going to chew through that. They're not going to do anything. But I don't have to worry about the air because it's a ventilated base.
Hmm.
And I also know that, you know, 30, 45 minutes later, I'm going to be removing that. Now, if you're moving it from, say, Melbourne to the other end of Gippsland, that's maybe not the best idea. But I've never had to do quite those kind of distances. And naturally, the other thing that you got to be mindful of is how far you move the hive. Like, it's the age-old thing, right? Like, never. If you're going to do it, then it needs to be less than 3 meters or more than 3 kilometers. Now, I think that's true in a rural context, but in a suburban context, you can probably get away with a little bit shorter period than 3 kilometers. Um,
Just because of
but
the obstacles.
no, because they're spoilt for choice
Okay,
in the
yeah.
suburbs.
Hmm.
Like if you're a foraging bee, and you're effectively released into a suburban area, and you're like, oh, great, well, this backyard's got this, this, and this, and the next backyard's got this, this, and that. It's almost like a smorgasbord. Whereas, if they're in a rural context, well, it might be nothing but, the same tree for kilometers.
Yeah.
So they will fly a lot further in order to get diversity. Um, whereas they may not necessarily have to do that in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Um, so
You're right. And that was a big learning curve for me. I started out my beekeeping in the city of Geelong, like in the middle.
yep.
And we moved out of Geelong now. We live out in a farm. And I did notice a big change in springtime, especially in terms of forage.
Mm.
Yeah, it's definitely really great to keep bees in the city.
Mm.
They've got a lot of access to, many different types of forage. It's really good.
Yeah. Oh, look, I think, well, I mean, it certainly leans into my business model, but I mean, I often get opportunities to put bees into, people say you can put 20, 30, 50 hives into this space in a rural setting. And I'm like, thanks, but no, thank you. And it's purely because, again, I'm selfish with my time. Like, I've got kids. I want to hang out with them, like on weekends, take them to their sports and things like that. So it can be a struggle to get, your beekeeping done and, do those kind of things at the same time. But, it's a short window in life, they'll reach a point where dad's the most boring thing in the world ever, right? So until then, I'll keep chipping away at it.